Now, introduction to communication. Now, there are a number of definitions from different authors, from Ordway T, from G.G. Brown, Lewis A. Allen, Fred G. Mayer, Keith Davis. But I'm more comfortable with the Keith Davis definition, which says communication is the process of passing information and understanding from one person to another. Now, what is the importance of communication in society? Now, communication binds people together and society together. It is considered as a natural process. So, society moves on human interactions and the exchange of ideas, thoughts, and feelings. So, the relationships are built upon or through communication. So, lack of communication among people in a society will severely affect social cohesion and cohabitation. So the progress and prosperity will come to a standstill if there's no effective communication. Therefore, communication is a factor of building and maintaining good relations. It enables people to understand each other. Communication is as important and meaningful as individual life in a society. So individuals make friends, they build relationships, and they lead a true social life through communicating effectively with fellow beings. So some of the importance of communication assessed as follows. Communication being needed to establish and disseminate organizational goals for the smooth and unperturbed functioning of an enterprise. Communication helping organizations in arriving at vital decisions. Communication helps a lot of in planning and coordination. It is a basic tool for motivation and increase the morale of employees in a business setup, and also in businesses. It's a means of bringing about maximum productivity. Maximum production at lowest levels by maintaining good human relationships in the organization. It works as an effective link between branches of an organization, and it helps in publicizing goods and services, and it reduces the rumors and ensures smooth running of organizations. So those are some of the importance of communication in a business context. What is interpersonal skills? Interpersonal skills refers to the ability to communicate or interact well with others. So in business terminology, it means a set of abilities enabling a person to interact positively and work effectively with others. So the process by which people exchange information, feelings, and meaning through verbal and non-verbal messages, it is face-to-face communication. In the absence of effective interpersonal communication among employees themselves, between the management and their employees, a business organization fails to ensure its smooth functioning and gradually runs away from realizing its objectives. So interpersonal communication is very important. It's used as a basis for successful businesses. What are the components of interpersonal communication? There you can see there's the sender, and the detail there with the sender, the message, the self-concept, listening, receiver, feedback, and barriers. Those make the key components of interpersonal communication. The communication process. The process of communication refers to the transmission or passage of information or message from the sender through a selected channel to the receiver, overcoming barriers that affect its pace. The process of communication is cyclic one, as it begins with the sender and ends with the same sender in the form of feedback. So it takes place upward, downward, laterally throughout the organization. And the process of communication as such must be continuous and dynamic interaction, both affecting and being affected by many variables. Communication process consists of certain steps where each step constitutes the essential of an effective communication. The following is a brief analysis of the important steps of the process of communication. Now, the different elements of the communication process: the sender, who is the person who originates the thought, the idea, the picture or symbol, or the report, that is the sender. Then the message is the information conveyed by words, is in speech, write-up, signs, pictures, symbols, depending upon the situation. Then encoding is the putting of the targeted message into appropriate medium, which may be verbal or non-verbal, depending upon the situation, time, space, and nature of the message to be sent. Then the channel refers to the way or mode the message flows or is transmitted through. The message is transmitted over a channel that links the sender and the receiver. The receiver is the person that the message is meant for, while the decoder refers to the interpretation or converting of the message sent into intelligible language. Then the feedback is the ultimate aspect of communication process. It refers to the response of the receiver to the message sent to him or her by the sender. Feedback is necessary to ensure that the message has been effectively encoded and sent, decoded, and comprehended. Now, at this point, you may pause the presentation, pause the video, and discuss with your partner, why is feedback important? Why is feedback important in a communication process? So you can discuss and share ideas with your classmates. So there are different types of feedback. There's negative feedback, there's positive feedback, and negative feed forward, and positive feed forward. You can also discuss on these types of feedback. How does each work? What is negative feedback? How does it differ from positive or negative feed forward and positive feed forward? Discuss and share ideas with your partner. The model of communication process. Now, the model of communication process, there you see the sender creates ideas, encode them, put them in an appropriate channel, send to the recipient does the decoding, then understanding it, then they send feedback to the sender. So that makes the model communication process. That is more of the communication cycle. Let's look at types of communication. Now, there are several different ways in which we share information with one another. For example, you might use verbal communication when sharing a presentation with a group. You might also use written communication when applying for a job or sending an email. There are 4 main categories of communication styles, including verbal, non-verbal, written, and visual. Now, verbal communication is the use of language to transfer information through speaking or sign language. It is one of the most common types or often used during presentations, video conferences, phone calls, meetings, one-to-one conversations, and so on and so on. Now, some of the steps you can take to develop your verbal skills: number 1, use a strong, confident speaking voice. Number 2, be an active listener. And number 3, avoid filler words like like, so, yeah, and so on. Non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication is the use of body language, gestures, and facial expression to convey information to others. It can be used both intentionally and unintentionally. For example, you might smile unintentionally when you hear something pleasing or enjoyable idea or piece of information. Non-verbal communication is helpful when trying to understand others' thoughts and feelings. Some of the tips that you can take in order to develop your non-verbal communication skills: notice how your emotions feel physically. Be intentional about your non-verbal communications, and also mimic non-verbal communications you find effective. Written communication. Written communication is the act of writing, typing, printing symbols like letters, numbers to convey information. It is helpful because it provides a record of information for reference. Writing is commonly used to share information through books, pamphlets, blogs, letters, memos, and etc. Emails and chats are also a common form of written communication in the workplace. Some of the steps you can take to develop your written skills: number 1, strive for simplicity. Number 2, don't rely on tone. Number 3, take time to review your written communication. And number 4, keep a file of writing you find effective and enjoyable. Visual communication. Visual communication is the act of using photographs, art, drawings, sketches, charts, graphs to convey information. Visual communication are often used as an aid during presentations to provide helpful context alongside written and or verbal communication. Now, here are some of the few tips you can take to develop your visual communication skills. Number 1, ask others before including visuals. Number 2, consider your audience. And to make improvements to your communication skills, set personal goals to work through the things you want to accomplish step by step. What are the barriers to communication? Barriers are obstacles or hindrances that prevent movement or flow and access of information in and outside an organization. In communication terminology, barriers refer to specific items that can distort or prevent communication within an organization. It affects effective exchange of ideas, thoughts, and information. Now, in a nutshell, anything that hinders the process of communication at any level is a barrier to effective communication. Barriers can be originated at any point in the communication process. They can be caused by sender, they may be found in the message transmission media, they may arise while receiving the message, or there may be problems in receiver's comprehension of the message. Now, here's the list of some of the barriers caused by the sender: lack of knowledge or insufficient ideas, negative attitude or lack of interest towards the message, negativity towards the receiver, inappropriate choice of communication channel or medium, poor communication skills like use of improper and high sounding words, grammatical errors, verbosity, and unwanted use of idioms, phrases, jargons, or slangs, inability to decide the proper timing of a communication, indecisiveness, prejudice, lack of concern for feedback. Those are some of the barriers which can be caused by the sender. Barriers in message transmission. Things that come in the way of smooth transmission of message are called barriers in message transmission. Message transmission is disturbed because of the following. So some of the barriers, the physical barriers, and there are barriers from the message, and there are channel barriers, then there is a long communication chain. Those are categories of some of the distortions, the causes of distortion. Problems in reception, right? Some of the problems or barriers that come with the reception, that is the sending of a message is complete when the receiver at the other end receives it. So if there are problems in receiving the message, the whole purpose of sending the message is defeated. The message is the vehicle for the sender to share feelings, thoughts, and ideas. The message can be immediately clear and understood, or murky and misleading, basing upon how well all the components of the communication process can be have been considered and accommodated. The meaning of a message is what the receiver assigns to it. And in effect, one of the major challenges of communication is to make sure that the meaning that is intended by the sender is the same as the meaning the receiver assigns to the message when it is received. Factors are creating problems in reception: the poor channel of communication, technical problems, not using some common tools in communication, and lack of language and semantic skills on the part of the recipient. Problems in receiver comprehension: the lack of interest, lack of knowledge, lack of communication skills, conflicting message, emotional distraction, information overload. Those are some of the problems. Dealing with barriers to effective communication. How do we handle barriers to communication, right? So we want to look at the various barriers and how we can be able to deal with them or handle the barriers there. So barriers in non-verbal communication, how do we deal with them? So try not to engage in gestures that will distract audience, such as wringing your hands, keeping your hands in your pocket, never spacing, not moving at all, leaning on the podium for entire presentation, constantly gesturing with the pen, the habit of shuffling your papers or clicking, keeping your arms crossed, inappropriate laughter. Some of those ones. That is, it is important to remember that we communicate with our bodies as well as our voice. So try not to engage in such gestures. How to do the barriers in verbal communication? They categorize as recognize, understand, interpret, distinguish, focus, and concentrate. I think you can now look at that in detail with this detail given there. Look at that, and also at this point you can pause and discuss and with your partner how do you deal with barriers to verbal communication. And some of the answers are there on this slide. Now, some of the barriers, the socio-cultural barriers, like different cultural background and familiar subject. Then we've got psychological barriers, like forming opinions and drawing conclusions before listening, lack of interest in the topic, inability to pay attention, and prejudice. Then we've got physical barriers, like noise